There could be no doubt about it. Jacob Marley was dead as a doornail. Now this must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come from the story I am about to relate. Jacob Marley was dead, and Ebenezer Scrooge knew it. Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and Marley had been business partners for I don't know how many years, and Scrooge was Marley's sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole friend, and his sole mourner. Now Scrooge had never painted out old Marley's name in the sign. There it stood, for years afterwards, above the warehouse door. Scrooge and Marley. Now sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge Scrooge, and sometimes Marley, but he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, was Ebenezer Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out a generous fire. Secret, self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you?" And no beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. And no children ever asked him what was the time. Even the blind men's dogs would tug their owners into doorways when they saw Scrooge coming. But what did Scrooge care? Bah! It was all the same to him. It was the very thing he liked. To edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all of human sympathy to keep its distance. The cold within him froze his old features, and nothing could thaw it 1 degree, not even at Christmas. Once upon a time, on Christmas Eve, Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. Now it was cold, bleak, biting weather, and the city clocks had only just gone 3, but already it was quite dark, and candles had begun flaring in the windows of the neighboring offices. Now the door to Scrooge's counting house inside was wide open, that he might keep an eye upon his clerk, Bob Cratchit. Now Cratchit sat in a dismal little cell beyond, copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but his clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like only 1 coal. But the clerk dared not replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room. And so Bob Cratchit pulled on his comforter and tried to warm himself at the candle, in which effort, not being a man of strong imagination, he failed miserably. Now as Scrooge sat, suddenly a young man entered. His face was all aglow, handsome and ruddy, and his eyes sparkled as he regarded old Scrooge. "Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!" cried the cheerful voice of Scrooge's only nephew. "Ah!" said Scrooge. "Humbug!" "Oh, Christmas, a humbug, Uncle? You don't mean that, I'm sure." "I do." "Merry Christmas! What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough." "Oh, well, come then. What right have you to be dismal? You're rich enough." "Ah, humbug!" "Oh, don't be cross, Uncle." "Well, what else can I be, when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older, but not an hour richer? If I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart." "Uncle." "Nephew, you keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine." "Well, keep it, but you don't keep it." "Well, then let me leave it alone." "Much good has it done you, much good may it ever do you." "Uncle, I am sure that there are a great many things from which I might have derived good, by which I have not profited. I dare say Christmas time among the rest. But I am sure I have always thought of Christmas time, when it has come round, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable time. Why, it's the only time I know of it in the long calendar of the year, when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely, and to think of those people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave, and not some other race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver into my pocket, I believe it has done me good, and will do me good, and I say God bless it." Now at this point, Scrooge's clerk in the far room involuntarily applauded, causing Scrooge to turn on him savagely. "Let me hear another sound out of you, and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation." Oh, don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow. Humbug! Oh, but why, Uncle, why? I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends? Good afternoon. I'm sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. But I have paid you a visit in homage to Christmas, and I shall keep my good Christmas humour to the last. So a Merry Christmas to you, Uncle. Oh, and a Happy New Year. Bah, humbug! Now, Scrooge, in letting his nephew out, had let 2 other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and they now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hands and bowed graciously to him. Scrooge and Marley, I believe, said the man, addressing his list. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley? Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night. Oh, well, we have no doubt that his liberality is well represented by his surviving partner, said the gentleman, presenting his credentials. At this festive time of year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common comforts, sir. Are there no prisons? Well, yes, sir, plenty of prisons. And the union workhouses, are they still in operation? Well, they are. I wish I could say that they were not. I'm very glad to hear it. I was afraid from what you had said at first that something had happened to stop them in their useful course. Oh, but sir, they hardly provide Christian charity of mind or body to the multitudes. A few of us are endeavouring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We choose this time of year because it is a time when want is most keenly felt and abundance rejoices. Now, what shall I put you down for? Nothing. You wish to be anonymous. I wish to be left alone. I don't make merry myself this time of year, and I can't afford to make idle people merry either. I have to support the establishments that I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. But sir, many can't go there, and many would rather die. Well then, if they would rather die, then they had better do it, and decrease the surplus population. It's not my business. It is enough for a man to understand his own business, and mine occupies me constantly. Now, good afternoon, gentlemen. Good afternoon. And seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the 2 gentlemen withdrew, and Scrooge returned to his labours. Meanwhile, outdoors, the fog and darkness thickened, and the cold became intense. Piercing, searching, biting cold. One young soul, gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold, stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him with a Christmas carol. But at the first sounds of "Come rest you merry gentlemen," Scrooge seized his ruler with such an energy of action that the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog and more congenial frost. At length, the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge fidgeted on his stool and tacitly admitted the fact to the expectant clerk in the back, who instantly snuffed out his candle and put on his hat. You'll be wanting all day tomorrow, I suppose? Oh, if quite convenient, sir. It is not convenient, and it's not fair. If I was to stop you half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, I'll be bound. And yet, you don't think me ill-used when I pay a full day's wages for no work? Well, sir, it is only once a year. A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. I suppose you must have the whole day, but be here all the earlier the next morning. Well, his clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge finished with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no greatcoat, went down a slide on Cornhill in honor of it being Christmas Eve, and then ran home to Camden Town as fast as he could to play at Blindman's Bluff. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and soon went home to bed. Now he lived in a gloomy suite of rooms that had once belonged to his deceased partner, and nobody lived there but Scrooge. Now the yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, was fain to grope about with his hands, for the fog and the frost hung about the black old gateway of the house. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large, and Scrooge had seen it night and morning during the whole of his residence in that place. And let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought upon Marley since his mention of his 7 years dead partner that afternoon. So then, let any man explain it to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, with his key in the lock of the door, suddenly saw in the knocker not a knocker, but instead dead Marley's face. Marley's face! It was not an impenetrable shadow as the other objects in the yard were, but it had a dismal light about it, and it looked at Scrooge the way that Marley used to look. Its eyes were wide open and perfectly motionless. That, and its livid colour, made it horrible. And then, as Scrooge looked fixedly at it, it was a knocker again. Now, to say that Scrooge was not startled by this would be untrue, but he put his hand resolutely on the key, turned it firmly, walked in, and lighted his candle. Now, he did pause a moment before he shut the door, and he did look carefully behind it first, as if he half expected to be terrified by the sight of Marley's pigtails sticking out into the hall. But there was nothing on the back of the door, except the screws and nuts which held the knocker on. And so he said, "Pooh, pooh!" and he closed the door with a deep echoing bang. Now Scrooge fastened the door and walked slowly across the hall and up the stairs, trimming his candle as he went. For as he did, he imagined for a moment that he saw a locomotive hearse going steadily on before him in the gloom. Not caring a button for it, up he went. But before he closed his heavy door, he went through his rooms to be sure that all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that. Now everything was as it should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in, double locked, which was not his custom. And thus secured, he put on his dressing gown and slippers and his nightcap and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. Now, the fireplace was an old one, built long ago and paved all round with quaint Dutch tiles, designed to illustrate the scriptures, hundreds of figures to attract his thoughts, and yet, that face of Marley's, 7 years dead, came like the ancient prophet's rod and swallowed up the whole. Bah! Humbug! There's somebody in the wine merchant's cellar. And up the stairs. It's up still, I won't believe it. I know him. It's Marley's ghost. And it was the same face as on the knocker. Jacob Marley, with his pigtail waistcoat, tights and boots. The chain he dragged was clasped about his middle, and it was long and like a tail and wound about him, made of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, and heavy purses wrought in steel. The body was transparent, so that Scrooge could look through his waistcoat and see the 2 buttons on his coat behind. Scrooge looked the phantom through and through, and felt the chilling influence of its death-cold eyes. How now? What do you want with me? Much. Who are you? Ask me who I was. Who were you then? You're very particular for a shade. In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley. You don't believe in me? What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses? I don't know. Well, then why do you doubt your senses? Well, because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach. You may be an undigested bit of beef, or a blot of mustard, or a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more of gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are. Humbug, I tell you, humbug! Oh, mercy, dreadful apparition! Why do you trouble me? Man of the worldly mind! Do you believe in me or not? I do. I must. But why do spirits walk the earth, and why do they come to me? It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad amongst his fellow men. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death, doomed to wander through the world and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth, and turn to happiness. You are fettered. Jacob, tell me why. I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link, and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange to you? Or would you know the weight and length of the strong coil you now bear yourself? Yours was full as heavy and as long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago, but you have labored on it since. Oh, it is a ponderous chain. Oh, Jacob, tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Jacob. I have none to give. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. Mark me. In life my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole, and weary journeys lie before me. Oh, no space of regret can make amends, for one life's opportunity is misused. Yet such was I. Oh, such was I. But you are always such a good man of business. Business! Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. Hear me. My time is nearly gone. I have come tonight to warn you that you may yet have chance and hope of escaping my fate, a chance and hope of my procuring Ebenezer. You will be haunted by 3 spirits. Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob? I think I'd rather not. Here, without their visit, you cannot hope to shun the path that I now tread. Expect the first tomorrow night, when the bell tolls 1. Why couldn't I just take them all at once and have it over with, Jacob? Expect the second on the next night at the same hour, and the next upon the following night, when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. And look to see me no more, and look that for your own sake, remember what has passed between us. And when it had said these words, the apparition walked backwards from him, and with every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. Scrooge became aware of confused noises from the outside air, incoherent sounds of lamentation and wailings of inexpressible sorrow. After listening for a moment, Marley's ghost joined in the mournful dirge and floated out upon the bleak, dark night. Scrooge followed to the window and looked out. The air was filled with phantoms moaning as they went, and every one wore chains like marbles. And the misery with them all was clearly that they sought to interfere for good in human matters, and had lost the power forever. Presently, the mist enshrouded them, and they and their spirit voices faded together, and the night became as it had been, and Scrooge walked home. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. But it was double locked, the bolts once more undisturbed. Bah! Hum! He had tried to say humbug, but stopped at the first syllable. And whether being because of the emotion that he had undergone, or the lateness of the hour, he went to bed without undressing, and fell asleep upon the instant. When Scrooge awoke, it was quite dark. He was endeavouring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes when the chimes of a neighbouring church rung out the 4 quarters, and so he listened for the hour. To his astonishment, the heavy bell went from 6 to 7, and then to 8, and regularly up to 12. 12? But it was past 2 when I went to bed. That clock must be wrong, and Icicle must have gotten into the works, no doubt. Scrooge returned to his bed, and there he lay until the chime had gone 3 quarters more, when he remembered of a sudden that the ghost had predicted that there would be a visitation when the bell tolled 1. So he lay awake and listened for the hour. Now the quarter was so long that Scrooge more than once imagined that he had sunk into unconsciousness and missed the clock altogether. But at length, it broke upon his listening ear. At once the curtains of his bed were drawn aside, and Scrooge came face to face with the unearthly visitor who drew them. It was a strange figure. Like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man viewed through some supernatural medium, which gave it the appearance of having receded from the view and being diminished to a child's proportions. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down its back, was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle on it. Its arms and hands were very long and muscular, and its legs and feet, most delicately formed, were like those upper members bare. It wore a tunic of purest white, and round its waist was bound a lustrous belt, the sheen of which was beautiful. It held a fresh green branch of holly in its hand, and yet it had its dress trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was that from the crown of its head there sprung a bright, clear jet of light, by which all this was visible, and which was no doubt the occasion of it using, in its duller moments, a great extinguisher for a cap, which it now held underneath its arm. Are you, sir, the spirit whose coming was foretold to me? I am. Who and what are you? I am the ghost of Christmas past. Long past? No, your past. May I be so bold as to inquire what business brought you here? Your welfare, your reclamation. Take heed, rise, and walk with me. Now, as it spoke, the spirit put out its strong hand and clasped Scrooge firmly by the arm. Now, the grasp, though gentle, was not to be resisted. Scrooge rose, but seeing that the spirit made towards the window, clasped his robe in supplication. But I am mortal and liable to fall. Bear but a touch of my hand, bear, and you shall be upheld in more than this. Now as the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road with fields on either side. Good heaven! I was bred in this place! I was a boy here! The spirit gazed upon him mildly, and Scrooge became conscious of 1,000 odours floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and cares and joys long, long forgotten. Your lip is trembling. And what is that upon your cheek? A pimple, nothing more. Lead on. You'll recollect the way. Remember it. I can walk it blindfold. They walked along, Scrooge recognizing every gate and post and tree. Some shaggy ponies were now seen trotting towards them with boys upon their backs, who called out to other boys in country gigs and carts driven by farmers. Now these are but the shadows of things that have been, and they have no consciousness of us. The jocund travellers came on, and as they came, Scrooge knew and named them every one. Why did his heart leap up as he saw them come past? And why was he filled with gladness when he heard them give each other Merry Christmas? What was Merry Christmas to Scrooge? Out upon Merry Christmas! What good had it ever done to him? The school is not quite deserted. A young child neglected by his friends is left there still. Scrooge said he knew this, and he sobbed. They left the well-remembered lane by the high road, and soon approached a mansion made of dull red brick. Entering a door at the back of the dreary hall, they went across to a door at the back of the house, and it opened before them to disclose a long, bare, melancholy room, made barer still by lines of desks. And at one of these, a young boy sat reading by a feeble fire. And Scrooge sat down and wept to see his poor forgotten self as he used to be. The spirit touched him on the arm and pointed to his younger self, intent upon his reading. Poor boy, I wish, but it's too late now. What is the matter? Nothing. There was a young boy singing a Christmas carol by my door last night. I should like to have given him something, that's all. Let us see another Christmas. Now, Scrooge's younger self grew larger at the words, and the room grew a little darker and more dirty. And there young Scrooge was again, alone. He was not reading this time, but instead walked up and down despairingly. And old Scrooge glanced at the ghost, and then looked anxiously towards the door. It opened, and in came a little girl, much younger than the boy, and throwing her arms around his neck, began kissing him over and over. "Oh, my dear, dear brother," she cried, "I have come to take you home." "Home, little Fan?" "Oh, yes, home. Home for good and all. Home for ever and ever." "Well, Father is so much kinder now than he used to be. And he spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed that I was not afraid to ask him one more time if you might come home. And he said yes, and he sent me in a coach to bring you. And you're to be a man now, and you're never to come back here. And we're to be together all the Christmas long and have the merriest time in all the world." "Oh, you are quite a woman, little Fan," said the young Scrooge. She clapped her hands, and she laughed, and she stood on tiptoe to embrace him. And then she began to drag him in her childish eagerness towards the door. Always such a delicate creature, whom a breath might have withered. But she had a large heart. So she had. She died a woman, and had, as I think, children? Yes, one child. True. Your nephew. Yes. They were now in the busy thoroughfares of the city, where carts and coaches battled for the way, and it was clear once again that it was Christmas time once more, except that it was evening and the streets were lighted up. Now the ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it. "Know it! I was apprenticed here!" They went in, and at the sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig sitting behind such a high desk, Scrooge cried with excitement, "Why, it's old Fezziwig! Bless his heart! It's Fezziwig! Alive again!" Well, old Fezziwig laid down his pen and glanced up at the clock, which now pointed to the hour of 7. He adjusted his capacious waistcoat and called out, "Yo ho there, Ebenezer! Dick! No more work tonight! Let's have the shutters up! Clear away, lads, and let's have lots of room here!" Well, Scrooge's former self, now grown a young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice, and it was done in a minute. Every movable was packed away, the floor was swept and watered, the lamps were trimmed, and fuel was heaped upon the fire, until the warehouse was as warm and bright and snug as a ball. In came a fiddler, and Mrs. Fezziwig, and the 3 Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In came all the young men and women employed by the business, the housemaid, the baker, and the cook. And in came the boy from across the way, behind the girl from next door. In they all came, and away they all went, round and round. After a time, old Fezziwig clapped his hands to stop the dance, but the fiddler, scorning rest, instantly began again. There were more dances, and there was cake, and there was a great piece of cold roast. There were mince pies and plenty of beer. But the great effect of the evening came after, when old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig. A positive light appeared to shine from the Fezziwig's calves, and they shone like moons in every corner of the dance. And when they had finished the dance, Fezziwig cut so deftly that his legs appeared to wink, and he came upon his feet again without a stagger. And when the clock struck 11, Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their positions, one on either side of the door, and shaking hands with everyone as he or she went out, wished him or her a Merry Christmas. And when everyone had retired but the 2 prentices, they did the same to them, and the lads were left to their beds, which were under a counter in the back shop. Now, during the whole of this time, Scrooge had acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene and with his younger self. He remembered everything and underwent the strangest agitation. It was not until the bright faces of himself and his fellow apprentice Dick were turned away from them that he remembered the ghost and became conscious that it was looking full upon him, while the light upon its head burnt high and clear. A small matter, to make you silly folks so full of gratitude. Small? Well, is it not? He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money. Is that so much that he deserves this praise? But it isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome. The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune. Scrooge felt the Spirit's glance on him and stopped. What is the matter? Nothing in particular. Oh, something, I think. No. I should just like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now, that's all. His former young self turned down the lamps as Scrooge gave utterance to the wish, and he and the ghost again stood in the open air. My time grows short. Quick, one shadow more. Again Scrooge saw himself, this time grown an old man. His face had only just begun to wear the signs of care and of avarice. There was an eager, greedy, restless motion in the eye which betrayed the passion that had taken root. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl, in whose eyes there were tears, which sparkled in the light that shone out of the ghost of Christmas past. It matters little to you, she said softly. Another idol has displaced me. And if it can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, well, then I have no just cause to grieve. What idol has displaced you? The younger Scrooge rejoined. A golden one. This is the even-handed dealing of the world. There is nothing on which it is so hard as poverty, and there is nothing it professes to condemn with such severity as the pursuit of wealth. You fear the world too much. I have watched your nobler passions fall off one by one until the master passion gain engrosses you. Well, so what then? Even if I have grown so much wiser, I am not changed towards you, am I? Our contract is an old one, and it was made when we were both poor and content to be so. But you are changed. When it was made, you were a different man. I was a boy. Your own feeling tells you that you are not what you are. I am. And that which promised happiness when we were one in heart is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often and how keenly I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it and can release you. Have I ever sought release? In words, no, never. Well, in what then? In a changed nature, in an altered spirit, in everything that made my love of any worth or value in your eyes. If this had never been between us, tell me. Would you seek me out and try to win me now? You think not? I would gladly think otherwise if I could. But I do. And I release you. With a full heart, for the love of him you once were. May you be happy in the life that you have chosen. And with that, she left, and they parted. Spirit, show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me this way? Remove me from this place. I told you these are the shadows of the things that have been, that they are what they are. Do not blame me. I do not wish to see it. I cannot bear it. Take me back. Hold me no longer. Scrooge turned then upon the spirit and wrestled with it. And the spirit, with no resistance on his own part, was undisturbed by any efforts of his adversary. Seeing that the light was burning high and bright upon its head, Scrooge seized the extinguisher cap and in a sudden action pressed it down upon its head. And the spirit dropped beneath it so that it covered its whole form. But though Scrooge pressed it down with all his force, he could not hide the light which streamed from under it in an unbroken flood upon the ground. Scrooge became conscious then of being overwhelmed by an irresistible drowsiness, and further of being in his own room. He barely had time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep.
Christmas tree, oh Christmas tree, with faithful leaves unchanging. Oh Christmas tree, with faithful leaves unchanging. Not only green in summer's heat, but also winter snow and sleet. Oh Christmas tree, with faithful leaves unchanging.
Awaking in the middle of a prodigiously tough snore, and sitting up in bed to get his thoughts together, Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell was once again upon the stroke of 1. Now Scrooge did not wish to be taken by surprise, and he wished to confront the spirit on the moment of its appearance. But when the bell struck 1, no shape appeared. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour went by and nothing came. Now all this time, Scrooge lay upon his bed, the very core and center of a blaze of ruddy light. And after a while, he began to think that the source of this unearthly light might be the adjoining room from whence it seemed to shine. The idea taking full possession of his mind, he got up softly and shuffled in his slippers towards it. Now the moment his hand was on the lock, a strange voice called him out by name. "Ebenezer Scrooge! Enter!" It was his own room. There could be no doubt about that, but it had undergone a startling metamorphosis. The walls and ceiling were hung with living green. From every part of it, bright, gleaming berries glistened. The crisp leaves of holly and mistletoe and ivy reflected back the light, and a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney. Now, heaped upon the floor to form a kind of throne were game, poultry, great joints of meat, wreaths of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, red-hot chestnuts and cherry-cheeked apples, and immense cakes, and seething bowls of punch which made the chamber dim with their delicious steam. And seated on this throne, in an easy state, was a glorious jolly giant, and it held in its hand a horn in shape not unlike Plenty's horn, and it shed its light upon Scrooge as he came peeping in round the door. "Come in! Come in, and know me better, man." Well, Scrooge entered timidly and hung his head before this spirit because, well, although the spirit's eyes were clear and kind, Scrooge did not like to meet. "I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me." Well, it was clothed in a simple green robe trimmed with white fur, and hung so loosely about the figure that its capacious breast was bare. Its dark brown curls were long and free, as its genial face, its open hand, its cheerful voice, and its joyful air. Girded about its middle was an ancient scabbard, but there was no sword in it, and the ancient sheath was eaten up with rust. "You have never seen the like of me before." "Never. Spirit, conduct me where you will. Tonight, if you have aught to teach me, then let me profit by it." "Touch my robe!" Scrooge did as he was asked, and the room and all its trappings vanished instantly. And there they stood upon the city streets once again. Now, it was a snowy Christmas morning, and there was an air of cheerfulness abroad, for the people who were shoveling away were jovial and full of glee, calling out to one another, and now and then exchanging a facetious snowball. But soon steeples called good people all to church and chapel, and away they came, flocking through the streets in their best clothes and with their gayest faces. Now the sight of these revellers appeared to interest the spirit very much. He stood with Scrooge beside him and sprinkled incense from his torch upon their dinners. And it was a very uncommon kind of torch, for once or twice, when there were angry words between some dinner carriers, he shed a few drops of water on them from it, and their good humour was restored directly. For they said it was a shame to quarrel upon Christmas Day. "Is there a particular flavour in what you sprinkle from your torch?" "There is. My own." "And would it apply to any kind of dinner on this day?" "To any kindly given, but to a poor one most." "But why to a poor one most?"
"Because it needs it most."
Well, they went on invisible as they had done before. And it was a remarkable quality of the spirit that, notwithstanding its gigantic size, it was able to accommodate itself into any place with ease. And it stood beneath a low ceiling quite as gracefully as it could have done in any lofty hall. Now presently, the spirit made its way towards Scrooge's clerk's dwelling. He smiled and he stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's home with the sprinklings of his torch. Up rose Mrs. Cratchit, Bob Cratchit's wife, and laid the cloth, assisted by Belinda Cratchit, the second of her daughters, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into a saucepan of potatoes, and the two little Cratchits, a boy and a girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they had seen the goose, and smelt it and known it for their own. "Well, whatever has got your precious father, then?" said Mrs. Cratchit. "And your brother Tiny Tim? And Martha weren't as late last Christmas Day by half an hour." "Oh, here's Martha, mother," said the two young Cratchits. "Oh, Martha, there's such a goose, Martha." "Well, bless your heart, my dear, how late you are." "Oh, well, we had a great deal of work to do last night, mother, and had to clear away this morning." "Oh, never you mind, never you mind. Just come in and have a seat by the fire, bless your heart, my dear, and have a warm, Lord bless you." "Oh, no, Martha, here's father coming. Hide, mother, hide." And so Martha hid herself, and in came Bob, little Bob the father, with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder. And alas for Tiny Tim, he bore a little crutch and had his limbs supported by an iron frame. "And how was our little Tim behaving today?" "Oh, as good as gold, and better." He gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped that the people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and that it might be pleasant for them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. Well, his active little crutch was heard upon the floor, and back came Tiny Tim, escorted by his brother and sister, to his stool beside the fire. And while Bob compounded some hot mixture in a jug and stirred it round and round, Master Peter and the two ubiquitous young Cratchits went off to fetch the goose, with which they soon returned in high procession. Now, at last, the grace was set. Mrs. Cratchit, looking slowly all along the carving knife, prepared to plunge it into the breast. And when she did, and that long-expected issue of stuffing came forth, well, one murmur of approval went all round the board, and an overexcited Tiny Tim beat the handle of his knife upon the table and feebly cried, "Hurrah!" Well, Bob said he didn't believe that there was ever such a goose cooked. Eked out with applesauce and mashed potatoes, it was sufficient dinner for them all. And the pudding blazed in half a quartern of ignited brandy like a blazing cannonball. Now, after dinner, a shovelful of chestnuts were thrown onto the fire, and the whole family gathered round the hearth. At Bob Cratchit's elbow stood the family display of glass, which held the hot stuff from his jug, as well as golden goblets would have done. And he passed it round with beaming looks. A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears, he said. God bless us. Oh, Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas! God bless us, every one, said Tiny Tim, the last of all. Spirit, said Scrooge with an interest that he had never felt before. Tell me if Tiny Tim will live. I see a vacant seat in a poor chimney corner and a crotch without an owner carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die. Oh, no, no, kind spirit, say that he will be spared. If these shadows remain unaltered, then none other of my race will find him here. What then? If he be like to die, he had better do it, and decrease the surplus population. Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the spirit, but raised it again speedily upon hearing his own name. I give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast. The founder of the feast, indeed! I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon. My dear, the children, Christmas Day. Well, it should be Christmas Day when one toasts the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, and unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. My dear, Christmas Day. I'll drink his health, for your sake and for the day's, but not for his. A long life to him, and a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to him. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt. Well, the children toasted after her. The mention of Scrooge's name had cast a dark shadow across the party. But when it had gone, they were 10 times merrier than before. The jug and the chestnuts went round, and by the by, they had a song from Tiny Tim, who had a plaintive little voice, and sang it very well indeed. Now, there was nothing of high mark in this. They were not a handsome family, they were not well dressed, but they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time. And when they disappeared in the last sprinklings of the spirit's torch at parting, Scrooge had his eye upon them, and especially on Tiny Tim, until the last. No! Oh, Scrooge was taken by surprise then to hear a hearty laugh, and to recognize it as his own nephew's, and to suddenly find himself in a bright, dry, gleaming room with the spirit standing smiling by his side, and looking upon that same nephew with approving affability. He said Christmas was a humbug, as I live, said Scrooge's nephew, and he believed it too. Well, more shame to him, Fred, said Scrooge's niece by marriage, indignantly. Oh, he's a comical old fellow, and not as pleasant as he might be, but his offences carry their own punishment, and I have nothing to say against him. Well, I'm sure he's very rich, Fred. At least you always tell me so. And what of that, my dear? His wealth is of no use to him. He doesn't do himself any good with it. He doesn't make himself comfortable with it, and he hasn't the satisfaction of thinking he's ever going to benefit us with it. Oh, I have no patience with him, Fred. Oh, I have. I feel sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers from his ill whims? Himself, always. Here, he takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us, and what's the consequence? He loses a few pleasant moments that could do him no harm. I need to give him the same opportunity every year, whether he likes it or not, because I pity him. Well, after tea, Scrooge's niece played well upon the harp, but the whole evening was not devoted to music. First there was a game of blindman's buff, and then forfeits, and likewise a game of how, when, and where. Now, there must have been 20 people there, young and old, but they all played, and so did Scrooge, for quite forgetting that his voice made no sound upon their ears. He sometimes came out with his guesses quite loud, and often guessed quite right too, because though the sharpest needle was not sharper than Scrooge, as blunt as he took it in his head to be. Now the whole of this time, the spirit was so pleased to find Scrooge in this mood, and looked upon him with such favour, that Scrooge begged like a boy to be allowed to stay until the last of the guests had gone home. But the spirit said, this could not be done. Oh, but here is a new game. Oh, 1/2 hour, spirit, only one. Now this game was called Yes and No. Scrooge's nephew had to think of something, and the rest must find out what, him only answering to their questions yes or no, as the case was. Now the brisk fire of questions elicited from him that he was thinking of a live animal, a savage animal, an animal that growled and grunted sometimes, and lived in London, and walked about the streets, and did not live in a menagerie, and was never killed in a market, and was not a horse or an ass, or a cow, or a bull, or a dog, or a tiger, or a cat, or a pig, or a bear. At last, falling about with laughter, Scrooge's niece's sister cried out, "Oh, I have found it out! I know what it is, friend! I know what it is! And what is it then? It's your Uncle Scrooge!" Which indeed it was. Though some objected that the answer to "is it a bear" ought to have been yes. Oh, he has given us plenty of merriment, I am sure, and it would be ungrateful not to drink his health. To Uncle Scrooge, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man. He wouldn't take it from me, but he may have it nevertheless. Well, Scrooge had become so light of heart by now that he would have thanked them with an inaudible speech, if the ghost had given him time. But the whole of the scene passed off in the breath of the last word uttered by his nephew, and he and the spirit were again upon their travels. Much they saw and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. The spirits stood beside sick beds, and they were cheerful. In foreign lands, and they were close at home. By struggling men, and they were patient in their greater hope. By poverty, and it was rich. In misery's every refuge, the spirit left his blessing, and taught Scrooge his precepts. Now, it was a long night, if it was only a night. But Scrooge had his doubts about this. The whole of the Christmas holidays had seemed to be condensed into the space of time that they had spent together. And it was strange, too, Scrooge observed, that the ghost appeared to be clearly older, and he noticed that its hair was now grey. A spirit's life so short? My life upon this globe is very brief, and it ends tonight at midnight. Hark! The time is drawing near. Spirit, forgive me if I am not justified in what I ask, but I see something strange protruding from your skirt. Is it a foot or a claw? It might be a claw, for the flesh there is upon it. Look here. From the foldings of its garment, it brought 2 children. They knelt down at the spirit's feet and clung upon the outside of its garment. They were a boy and a girl, and where graceful youth should have filled out their features, a stale and shriveled hand like that of age had pinched and twisted them. And where angels might have sat enthroned, devils lurked and glared out menacing. Spirit, are they yours? They are man's. This boy is ignorance, and this girl is want. Beware them both, and all of their degree. But most of all, beware this boy, for on his brow I see that written which is doom. But have they no resource or refuge? Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses? The clock struck 12. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost and saw it not. When the last stroke had ceased to vibrate, he suddenly remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes, beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground towards him. The spirit slowly, gravely, and silently approached, and as it came, in the very air through which this spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and mystery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its arms, and left nothing of it visible, save one outstretched hand. And when it came alongside Scrooge, its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved. I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come. You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not yet happened, but that will happen in the time before us. Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. But as I know that your purpose is to do me good, I am prepared to bear you company and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me? Lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me. I know. Lead on, spirit. The phantom moved away. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its cloak, which bore him up, carried him on. The city seemed to spring up about them, and there they were in the heart of it, with the merchants who hurried up and down and chinked the money in their pockets as Scrooge had seen them often. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen, and seeing that the hand was pointed towards them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk. Well, no, I don't know much about it either way. I only know that he's dead. Well, when did he die? Last night, I believe. Well, how did he die? Why? What was the matter with him? I thought that he would never die. Well, God knows. And what has he done with his money? I haven't heard. He's left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know. Well, it's bound to be a very cheap funeral, for upon my life, I don't know of anybody to go to it. Well, I don't mind going, if a lunch is provided. But I must be fed if I do. But the speakers and listeners moved away. Scrooge knew the men, and he looked towards the spirit for an explanation. Scrooge was at first inclined to be surprised that the spirit should attach such importance to a conversation apparently so trivial. But feeling assured that it must have some hidden purpose, he set himself to consider what it was likely to be. Now he looked about for his own image, but another man stood in his accustomed place. And though the clock pointed to his usual time of day for being there, he saw no likeness of himself among the multitudes. Quiet and dark beside him stood the phantom, with its outstretched hand. Now they soon left the city, and went into an obscure part of town where Scrooge had never been before, but he knew it because of its bad repute. The ways were foul and reeked with crime and filth and mystery. And far in this den of infamous resort was a low-browed beetling shop, and heaped upon the floor inside were rusted keys and chains and nails and heaps of refuse iron of all kinds. Sitting in amongst the wares, by a charcoal stove, was a grey-haired rascal who smoked a pipe in all the luxury of calm retirement. Now Scrooge and the phantom came into the presence of this man at the same time as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop. But no sooner had she entered when another woman, similarly laden, entered as well, followed closely by a man in faded black. After a short period of blank astonishment, in which the old man with the pipe joined them, they all three burst into a laugh. Oh, look here, old Joe, here's a chance. If we haven't all three met here without meaning it. Well, you couldn't have met in a better place. Come into the parlour. Come in. For the parlour was a space behind a curtain of rags. And while the old man raked a fire together with an old stair rod, the woman who had already spoken threw her bundle upon the floor. What odds then? What odds, Mrs. Dilber? Well, everyone has the right to take care of themselves. He always did. And who's the worse? Who's the worse off for the loss of a few things? Not a dead man, I suppose. But if he wanted to keep him after he was dead, then why wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, he'd have had somebody with him when he was struck with death, instead of lying there, gasping out his last, all alone by himself. Now open that bundle, old Joe, and let me know the value of it. But the gallantry of her friends would not allow this, and the man in faded black produced his bundle first. It was not extensive. A seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, and a brooch of no great value were all. They were examined and appraised by old Joe, who was disposed to chalk the sums that he was going to give for them upon the wall, and totaled them up when he found that there was no more to come. And Mrs. Dilber was next. Sheets and towels, a little wearing apparel, a pair of sugar tongs, a couple of teaspoons, and some old boots. And Joe tallied up her figures on the wall in the same way. And now, open up my bundle, old Joe! Here, what do you call these? Bed curtains? You don't mean to say you took them down, rings and all, with him lying there? Yes, I did. And why not? Oh, you are bound to make your fortune, and you will do it too. Well, I certainly shan't hold my head when I can get anything in it by reaching it out. For the likes of such a man as he was, I promise you, Joe. His blankets? Well, who else do you think? He ain't likely to catch cold without him, I dare say, is he? Well, I hope he didn't die of anything catching. Well, don't you worry about that. I wouldn't stay and hang around him for the likes of it if he had done, that's for sure. Ah, and you may look through that shirt till your eyes turn blue, but you won't find a hole in it. It's the best he had in a fine one, too. He'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me. He's putting it on him to be burying him. Someone was foolish enough to do it, but I took it off him again. And this is the end of it, you see. He scared everyone away from him when he was alive, to profit us when he was dead. Now Scrooge listened to this conversation in horror. Spirit, I see. The case of this unfortunate man might be my own. My own life tends that way now. But, merciful heavens, what is this? For the scene had changed yet again. And Scrooge now stood almost touching the bed. A bare, uncurtained bed, on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there lay a something, which, although still and silent, announced itself in awful language. Plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of a man. Scrooge glanced at the spirit. Its hand was pointed directly to the head. The cover was adjusted so carelessly. The slightest raising of it, the barest motion of a finger on Scrooge's part would have disclosed the face. He thought how easy it would be to do. But he had no more power to withdraw the veil than he had to dismiss the spectre by his side. Oh, Spirit, this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson. I promise you. Now let us go. Spirit, I understand, and I would if I could, but I have not the power. Spirit, I have not the power. Oh, good Spirit, I beg of you, let me see some tenderness connected with her death. The spirit spread its dark robe before him, like a wing for a moment. Withdrawing it, he conducted him through several streets, familiar to his feet. And as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself but nowhere was he to be seen. They soon entered Bob Cratchit's house and saw the mother and the children seated by the fire. Quiet. Very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were still as statues in one corner and sat looking up at Peter, who had a book open before him. Mrs. Cratchit and the daughters were engaged in sewing. And he took a child and he set him in the midst of them, Peter read aloud. Mrs. Cratchit put her work upon the table. Oh, the colour hurts my eyes. It makes them weak by candlelight, and I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home, for all the world. It must be nearest time. Past it, rather, but I think he's walked a little slower these last few evenings, Mother. But I've known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder very fast indeed. But then he was very light to carry, and his father loved him so much that it was no trouble. Oh, and here's your father at the door. You went today then, Bob? Oh, yes, my dear. I wish you could have gone. It would have done your heart good to see how green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday. Now they drew about the fire and talked, and Bob Cratchit told them of the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew, whom he had met in the street that day. I'm very heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit, he said, and heartily sorry for your good wife, too. By the by, how he ever knew that, I don't know. Well, knew what, my dear? Well, that you were a good wife. It really seemed as if he had known our Tiny Tim and felt with us. Oh, I'm sure he's a good soul. Oh, you would have been surer, my dear, if you could have saw and spoken to him. Oh, and I shouldn't be surprised, mark my words, if he got Peter a better situation. Only hear that, Peter! And then soon Peter will be keeping company with someone and setting up for himself. It's just as likely as not, one of these days. But however and whenever we do part from one another, I am sure we shall none of us forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we? Well, this first parting there was among us. And his wife kissed him, and his daughters kissed him, and the two young Cratchits kissed him, and Peter and himself shook hands. Spirit of Tiny Tim, thy childish essence was from God. Inspector, something tells me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Tell me who that man was whom we saw lying dead. Now the phantom conveyed him, as before, into the resorts of businessmen, but showed him not himself. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but instead went straight on. This court through which we are now hurrying is where my place of occupation is. I see the house. Let me behold what I shall be in days to come. Spirit, the house is yonder. Why do you point away? The spirit stopped, for the hand was pointing elsewhere. Scrooge hastened to the window of his office and looked in. But the furniture was not the same, and the man in the chair was not himself. The spirit pointed as before. Scrooge joined it once again and accompanied it until they reached an iron gate. The churchyard. Here then the wretched man, whose name Scrooge was now to learn, lay underneath the ground. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. Scrooge advanced, trembling. Spirit, before I look at the writing on the stone to which you now point, answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they shadows of the things that may be only, but still the ghost pointed downward to the grave by which it stood, immovable as ever? And Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger, read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. Spirit, am I the man who lay upon the bed? Oh no, Spirit, oh no, no, no. Spirit, hear me. I am not the man that I was, and I will not be the man that I was. Good Spirit, assure me that I may yet change the shadows of the things that you have shown me by an altered life. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year, and I will live in the past, the present, and the future. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, Spirit, tell me that I may sponge away the writing on the stone. In his agony, Scrooge caught the spectral hand. The spirit sought to free itself, but Scrooge was strong in his entreaty and detained it. But the spirit, stronger still, repulsed him, and throwing up his hands in one last prayer to have his fate reversed, Scrooge noticed an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress, and it shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Yes, and the bedpost was his own, and the bed was his own, and the room was his own. And best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own, to make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirit of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven at the Christmas time be praised. I say it on my knees, oh Jacob, on my knees. The curtains are still here. They've not been torn down. They are here, and I am here. And the shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be. I know they will. I don't know what to do. I am as light as a feather. I am as happy as an angel. I am as merry as a schoolboy. And I am giddy as a drunken man. Merry Christmas to everyone. And a Happy New Year to all the world. There's the door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered, and the corner where the ghost of Christmas present sat. It's all true, it's all real, it all happened! I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. Hello! You there, my fine fellow! What day's today? Today? What's Christmas Day? Oh, Christmas Day! I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. Well, of course they can. They can do anything they like. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow. Do you know the poulterers in the next street but one at the corner? Well, I should help, I do. An intelligent boy. A remarkable boy. Do you know if they have sold the prize turkey that was hanging there? Not the little prize turkey, but the big one? Was there one as big as me? What a delightful boy. It's a pleasure talking to him. Yes, my back! Well, it's hanging there right now. Is it? Well, go and buy it. You what? No. I am in earnest. Go and buy it and tell them to bring it here that I may give them direction where to take it. And come back with the man and I will give you a shilling. And come back with him in less than 5 minutes and I'll give you half a crown. Well, the boy was off like a shot. I sent it to Bob Cratchit's. He shall know who sent it. Why, it's twice the size of Tiny Tim. Well, Scrooge went down to the street door in advance of the coming of the poulterer's man. Oh, I scarcely ever looked at it before. I shall love it as long as I live. Oh, what an intelligent expression it has in its face. It's a wonderful look. Oh, and here's the turkey. He never could have stood on those legs, that bird. He would have snapped them off short in a minute, like sticks of sealing wax. How do you do? Oh, it's impossible to carry back to Camden Town. You must have a cab. A Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas! Well, Scrooge dressed in his best, and at last went out into the streets. And by this time the people were pouring forth as he had seen them with the ghost of Christmas present, and he greeted each one with a delighted smile. He had not gone far when, coming on towards him, he beheld the two portly gentlemen who had come into the counting house the day before. "Oh, my dear sir! Yes. Oh, how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. Merry Christmas to you, sir."
Mr. Scrooge?
"Oh, yes, that is my name. And allow me to ask your pardon. Will you do me the favour?" And here Scrooge whispered in the man's ear.
Oh, Mr. Scrooge, my dear sir. You can't be serious.
"Oh, yes, if you please, and not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in that, I assure you."
But my dear sir, I don't know what to say to such munificence.
"Well, then don't say anything. Just come and see me. Will you come and see me?"
I will.
I thank you. Oh, I am much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. Bless you. Well, Scrooge went to church and then walked about the streets, watching the people hurrying to and fro, and found that everything could yield him pleasure, never dreaming that any walk, that anything could give him such happiness. In the afternoon, he turned his steps towards his nephew's house, and he passed the door at least a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock. "Is your master at home, my dear?" "Oh, thank you, my dear. He knows me." But Scrooge's hand was on the lock of the dining room as he said this, and he turned it gently and sidled his face in round the door. "Fred?" Oh, well, dear heart alive, how his niece by marriage started, because Scrooge had forgotten all about her for a moment, seated in the corner by the footstool. "Oh, who's that, then?" said Fred. "Well, it is I, your Uncle Scrooge. I've come to dinner." "Will you let me in, Fred?" Well, let him in. It's a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes, and his niece was the same, and so was everyone when they came. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness. Now Scrooge was early at the office the next day. Oh, but if he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late. That was the thing he had set his heart upon. And he did. The bell struck 9. No Bob. 1:15. No Bob. He was full 18 minutes and a half behind his time, and Scrooge sat with the door to his office wide open that he might see him come in. Now Bob's hat was off before he walked through the door, and he was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock. "Hello? And what is the meaning of your coming here at this time?" "Oh, I am very sorry, sir. I am behind my time." "You are? Step this way, sir, if you please." "Oh, but it's only once a year, sir. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir." "I tell you, I am not going to stand for this sort of thing any longer, and therefore—" And Bob Cratchit trembled when he heard this, got a little nearer to the ruler. He had a momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down with it. "And therefore, I am about to raise your salary." A Merry Christmas, Bob. A merrier Christmas than I have given you in many a year. I raise your salary and endeavour to assist your struggling family. Why, we shall discuss your affairs this very afternoon. Now, make up the fires and go and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit. But Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. he became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew. Now some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them, for his own heart laughed, and that was enough for him. He had no more visits from ghosts, and it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. And may that be truly said of all of us. And, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, every one.